listeners. Welcome to the Lone Screenplay Nominee Podcast, where we talk about films that were solely nominated for an Oscar in the writing categories. I'm your host, Matthew Anderson, and today we have Myles Hughes from Awards Radar on the show. Welcome back, Myles. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me back.
Yes, and as I said before, we tried attempting to record, but we're having some technical difficulties here on all together. But we're okay for now.
We're making it
And
work.
yeah, we're making it work. Yeah, we're just we're improvising at this point. Making it up as we go, as Indiana Jones said in Raiders of the Lost Ark. And yeah, so I mentioned on air and off air that, or at least mostly off air, that this is now your second time appearing on my podcast, and also the first time a guest has recurred or returned back from doing a previous episode. I'm really grateful that you're back on here talking about a Knives Out movie, which we'll get to in a few minutes. How does it feel to be back here on the show for this podcast?
It feels good to be setting milestones. I feel like I'm really, staking out my territory over here.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. And I'm, as we, we'll get into the other, what was it? A little bit of discussion for the third Knives Out movie, but it would
Yeah.
be really funny if, like, by some miracle, that ended up getting like a lone screenplay nod. I mean, even if it didn't, honestly, I would just say, like, you know what? Let's do a bonus episode and say fuck it,
For
because I already
sure,
had
but
you on for the other two.
for sure,
So
but what if they went 3 for 3? I mean, that would be something. That would be
uh,
cool.
yeah. Oh yeah,
What a
definitely.
weird
Yeah.
statistic.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure of the films that I've researched on, this might be the first set of duos where the first film and the second film got nominated for screenplay. Because the only other films I could think of were the Before trilogy, but the first, I think it was like Before Sunset or Before Sunrise, I think it was. That wasn't nominated for screenplay, but the two sequels were.
Oh, I was going to ask, were there any other sequels that you'd covered before? Was it just
Um,
those?
I mean, well, I haven't covered the Before trilogy yet,
Okay.
and when I get around to that down the road, I want to see them all in one go, or at least try to see them as they are. Just because it gives me a bit of it gives me a little bit better context in terms of like what I'm in for in terms of the story and such. I guess the only other sequel I think I could remember on the top of my head is Logan.
Oh,
But
sure,
that's sort of
sure.
I guess it's like the loosest terms of a sequel because it's mostly connected to the Wolverine only by like a couple references, and there's a couple like
Yeah.
visual Easter eggs, I guess, throughout the film with like the katana sword and all the other X-Men mentions. So
Yeah, not even a reboot, but what you might call a soft sequel.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, like I said, we'll get started on our conversation for Glass Onion pretty soon. Instead of going into our typical questions that I've already asked Miles on for Knives Out in terms of what he does for a living, and he already mentioned his favorite genre as well. If you'd like to learn more about that, you can check out our previous collaboration on here with my very first episode on Knives Out. Now, for this one, this time with Miles being a guest on the show and him being his second time on here, I'm going to ask one different question that I didn't tell you before because I wanted to sort of catch you off guard and be like, all right, what's the secret question Matt's going to ask? And I think I'm going to do this every time I ask for, anytime I have a guest already on come back, I'll just tie in said question within the film that we're covering. So in this case, it's Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery, which is not only a murder mystery, but it's also a sequel to the first film, Knives Out, by technicality, with Benoit Blanc involved in this chapter. I wanted to ask, with this sequel we're about to cover on the podcast, what are some of your favorite sequels and some of your least favorite sequels you've seen?
Ooh, that's a good question. Okay. Off the top of my head, well, one of my favorite sequels, like an all-timer, would easily make a top 10 list, and would also probably be my favorite action movie of all time, would be Terminator 2. Uh,
Yes.
that's one that I caught at a young age, probably way too young to have seen it. But it hit me just right, and that's one that we wore that VHS to the bone, as it were. And So that's one that's always really stuck with me. To this day, I mean, to say nothing of the Terminator franchise, which has sort of languished ever since. Um,
Yeah.
just from an action standpoint in general, it's got some sequences that I think still haven't been topped, like some of the most iconic stuff in all of cinema.
Yeah, even the it was really interesting because it's no longer available on the Blu-rays or DVDs now for Terminator 2, but I think it was like a laser disc version you can get of Terminator 2 where they actually talked about some of the editing sequences for Terminator 2. We saw it in editing class at Stevenson University, and they even showcased the Robert Patrick scene when he flies with the motorcycle onto the helicopter, and
Sure.
they show all the raw dailies in like four corners of like here's the main shot, here's the wide shot of the helicopter, here's the shot of like when Robert Patrick's head comes up, and I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but that shot where the guy's looking at him and he's from his point of view as he's starting to form and his head rolls up. I'm pretty sure they used like a prop silver metallic head as
Oh,
that when he's moving the head up, and that's what they use as like a reference for the day of. And also you can't really see too much of the of his his face and such, so it's like okay, you can kind of get away with that kind of like practical gag,
sure, sure.
which but yeah, it's really, yeah, that's still great. And Cameron's really good at doing really solid action sequels. Terminator 2 is really fantastic, and even Aliens is also another solid movie.
Aliens, also another great sequel.
Yeah. As for me, though, actually, before I even say what mine is, would you care to mention to our listeners out there are there any some of your least favorite sequels?
Well, I have a new least favorite, which I think you're maybe aware of, that I recently acquired this past December, which would be the Human Centipede 2, Part 2, second sequence, full sequence, whatever the fuck it's called. Um, yeah, that I hate that movie with eh, the core of my being. There's like, when I'm on my deathbed and I've forgotten my loved ones' names and faces, I will still have a special place in my heart reserved for my hatred of that film.
You'll be like in 2001: A Space Odyssey, where the guy's in bed and the last thing he sees is that damn uh, black box from 2001: A Space Odyssey. Hal, that's who it was.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my god, I actually forgot that it even existed. I'm like, oh yeah, you did see that because here I was thinking like, all right, like yeah, he's gonna bring up Ghostbusters. Was it
Yeah.
Afterlife? Was it?
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, my hot take, which, if you follow me on Twitter at Miles on Film, then you would probably know my take on this. Maybe. I don't know. Live your life. But my hot take on that is that there are no good Ghostbuster sequels. And they're all varying degrees of awful.
Mhm.
And if I had to pick a best one, it would probably be the 2016 one, but that's still not a stirring endorsement.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen that one. I actively avoided it because I'm like the trailers do nothing for me. But it seemed like at least it was trying to do something new, even if
It's
it didn't
here's
work.
what I'll say for it. It doesn't all the way work, but that one I think is at least the closest in spirit to what the original was doing, which is taking, a group of SNL comedians and like putting them in this scenario and like trying to have it sort of based more in the humor, whereas, 2 was maybe more about references and 4 was more about fucking Force Awakens style worshiping at the feet of the original film for some reason.
Yeah, and Jurassic
Um
World bullshit.
yeah, exactly. I hate it. But at least that one, like, it feels like a comedy. And, and I will say it's maybe even worth watching just because it is the originator of Chris Hemsworth as a comedic actor. Like,
Oh
love or hate his
yeah.
work in the later Thor movies. We wouldn't have gotten that without this. And then, that road potentially leads now to Dementis and Furiosa. So, in terms of the trajectory of his career, it's interesting, if nothing else.
Oh sure, definitely. Yeah. As far as like for me though, I mean, Mine's kind of a typical answer in terms of like favorite sequel of all time, Empire Strikes Back.
It's a
It's
classic, though. It's a
it
classic.
it it is, and I did a rewatch of it about a couple of years ago. Actually, I did at least three rewatches the last like 4 years when I did. It was like right before the pandemic. I showed a very close friend of mine and her family who had never seen Empire before, and in fact, one of my it was my close friend's sister had never even heard of the twist to Vader, didn't even catch on at all to it. And it was funny because some of the other people that I was watching it at their house, they somewhat started to catch on early in the film. They're like, "Oh, I think that I'm like, no, 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 don't say anything. Your questions will be answered by the end of the ride." And yeah, it still holds up. It's really really great, and yeah, I still think to this day that is my favorite sequel, and easily one of my favorite films of all time. Just because it's doing something new and different, and it's actually doing something challenging for once. It's showing, hey, this like, one trick pony that people think the first one was. It's like, hey, you could actually branch off and do something different and actually revitalize this into, expanding more of the ideas and the concept of obviously good versus evil, but even, the force and all that stuff. But yeah, the current state of Star Wars is pretty vitriolic just because of its fans, over obsessive, fanboying and being like, tiny stuff. It's like, dude, who cares? Like, what really matters is just like the whole sum of its parts. And instead of like, hey, let's nitpick this like one idea of said, movie, it was, of the story, whatever. And I'm like, who cares? That's part of the reason why I just never really caught on to like the Acolyte, was it that show, or some of the other stuff. Although I've been hearing Andor is actually pretty good, which I haven't seen yet.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing. First of all, everything you said about Empire is completely true. It has its reputation for a deserved reason.
Yeah.
Also, man, it gives you hope in the world that there's still people out there that you can get with the Vader twist. That's nice to hear.
Yeah.
I love that. But in terms of that, I don't know. I'd have to go back to it. Andor might be the best Star Wars, like, period.
Of all time.
Like,
Okay.
including the original trilogy. It's if it's not, it's at least worthy of like being on that comparable level.
Okay.
It's like it feels like a completely different, because I agree with you on the rest of the Star Wars TV stuff. Like, I didn't finish the last season of The Mandalorian. I hated Boba Fett and Obi-Wan. I'm pretty tuned out on the whole machine as of right now. But
Yeah.
Andor is like amazing and kind of just its own thing, and you don't really have to know anything about anything to enjoy it. Like, not even
Mhm.
Rogue One, really. It kind of just stands on its own legs. Um, and I would always recommend that one to people as like a give it a shot. It's slow, so you got to stick with it, but that might be as good as the franchise gets.
Okay. Yeah. I think part of the reason also as to why I just didn't watch Andor is because I wasn't the biggest fan of Rogue One.
No, me neither.
Um,
No, I had to
and
be talked around to it.
yeah, so we'll see. I might try to, and also I'm just, yeah, I got a whole other thing with TV that we'll get to another time because it would just
Sure, sure.
take up even longer on the episode. As far as like one of my least favorite sequels I'd seen ever, I mean, there's a fuck ton I've seen. I just went through like the Jurassic World sequels, which are awful.
Yeah, those
I
are rough.
recently, yeah, I recently also watched Age of Extinction as part of my Deal with the Devil, which is abysmal. I guess I'll just go for the easy punching bag. Going from one 20th Century Fox property to another. Good Day to Die Hard. I think is just a waste of
Oh,
time, and it's one where it's like watching the first one recently back in like December of this past year. It just made me be like, wow, like this movie is so fucking good. Like the first one, and it's got everything that I like about it. Even like it obviously showcased Bruce Willis's acting chops as a whole, and then the fifth one just decimates all of that. Like the action isn't even that great, the acting is piss poor. Like all of it just felt like a forgettable, well, not even good enough for Walmart DVD bins, which they don't even have anymore because I work at one. But it's the equivalent of that, but worse than that, I guess, and just a waste of time on everyone's part. And It's a shame that it's like one of the last major movies that Bruce Willis starred in before he retired. At least
Yeah,
one of
I
the more
know.
notable ones.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, just a waste of time on everyone's part. But yeah,
They
I
should have
guess
called
that's
it Dire Hard because that movie is dire.
yeah, it's in dire need of a better screenwriter that isn't Skip
There you
Woods.
go.
So, anyways, yeah. So with that said, we're not going to waste any more time. We're going to get into our spiel on our movie. So today we're here to discuss Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery, which came out in 2022. This won't be a beat by beat bulletin presentation like you hear on other channels, but we will be discussing major spoilers for our talk. If you haven't seen the film yet and want to hear our full thoughts on it, watch the film first, which is on Netflix, by the way, guys, and then come back to hear us talk about it. So with that, without further ado, I'll just get in through the production notes on this. So excuse me, not Glass Onion, after Knives Out was a critical and box office success, filmmaker Ryan Johnson had already came up with some ideas on making more mystery thrillers with Benoit Blanc as his lead. While Lionsgate gave the green light for a sequel to be made, Netflix outbid both Amazon and Apple and purchased the rights to two sequels for a grand total of $469 million dollars. At least that's what it was the last time I checked, while making the production budget on Glass Onion roughly around $40 million. Ryan wrote the screenplay during the COVID-19 lockdown and set the film in Greece, coming from a desire to travel abroad when international travel was shut down. He also wanted to make this entry to be a standalone film, but have the same detective involved, like Agatha Christie did with her books, with the character Hercule Poirot. I think that's how you. I might have butchered his
Poirot.
name. Poirot. Okay. Sorry, I'm not.
Close enough.
I'm not like a literature classic auteur. Expertise, I guess. Sorry. So yeah, so Glass Onion premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival in 2022 and only had a 1 week theatrical run for select theaters, making only an estimated $15 million. I should also point out, I forgot to write this down on my notes here. Last time I checked, I'm pretty sure it was in like second place or third place for the People's Choice Award at the Toronto International Film Festival. Uh,
I
although the
think you
prize
might be right. Yeah.
although the prize ended up going to Fablemans, I remembered.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, so yeah. So anyways, yeah. So outside of the lone adapted screenplay nomination at the Academy Awards, the film received two Golden Globe nominations for picture, comedy musical, and lead actor comedy musical for Daniel Craig. It also earned six Critics' Choice Awards nominations, including two wins in Best Comedy and Acting Ensemble, a Producers Guild of America nomination, and a Writers Guild of America Award nomination for adapted screenplay. And just like its predecessor, Glass Onion did not receive a single Screen Actors Guild nomination for any of the cast members in the film. Not even as an ensemble nomination did it get, which is really strange. And I was like, wait, what?
Don't get it. Don't get it.
Yeah. Outside of like guest competition, although I'll have to look that up real quick to see what was nominated at the Screen Actors Guild for ensemble in a minute. At the time of the recording of this recording, though, Ryan is coming back to write and direct the third film in the franchise called Wake Up Dead Man, a Knives Out mystery. At least that's what the title is for right now. There could, like many of these movies, they could change the title. I mean, hell, Return of the Jedi was Revenge of the Jedi for a while, and then the last minute they changed it to Return of the Jedi. So we'll see. But Wake Up Dead Man is currently slated to be released in 2025. And yeah, and as far as the logline for Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery, Benoit Blanc travels to a private island in Greece after being invited to take part in a murder mystery game at Miles Braun's Glass Onion. From there, things turn south as this ends up being more than a weekend of relaxation. So, Miles, my question of many I want to ask you is again, for anyone who wants to hear our thoughts on the first one, you can check out our review for Knives Out. It's already on the podcast. So we won't really dabble too much into that unless there's some things we want to bring up within this movie. My question for you is, what was your anticipation when you heard, oh, we're getting another Knives Out movie, and this time it's going to be from Netflix? Were you excited? Were you trepidatious? Were you more, oh, really, Netflix? Or what was your reaction to the announcement of this?
So you kind of hit both aspects of it right there because on the one hand, you see Knives Out and, anyone who's familiar with Agatha Christie or any of these other sort of classic murder mystery series will know like, oh, there's immediate potential here for an extended series of Benoit Blanc adventures. So the confirmation of that, especially with Ryan Johnson returning to write and direct, which is obviously the secret sauce that like you take that out, why bother?
Yeah, exactly.
Um so I think from that perspective, that was really exciting. Now, the Netflix of it all does have to be couched in a little bit of squirminess just about the modern state of things and thoughts about streaming in general. The big thing
Yeah.
that we learned, and you touched on it in your preamble, is that because it's a Netflix film, the priority is on it as a streaming release. So therefore, as a theatrical release, it did only play for that 1 week. And I know because I had to scramble to catch it on the big screen while I could.
Oh.
Um, and it plays beautifully on the big screen because it's very lavish, and we'll get into it, but it's got great production design and just ornate locations, and with the score and everything it really has this epic grand feel that like it's there when you watch it on Netflix, but you lose a little bit of something, I feel.
Mhm.
So yeah, from that perspective I think I was a little mixed, although obviously the aspect of it that was most exciting was that they greenlit two sequels in one go, so we get at least a confirmed trilogy out of the package.
Yeah, and then as Deadpool 2 said in the was it one of its trailers, you stopped at 2, you killed it.
Hmm.
And yeah, I was definitely curious about it. I was thinking to myself, okay, yeah, I'll have a fun time at if nothing else with the movie, if it's as good as the first in terms of entertainment value. I didn't get a chance to see this first one. Well, excuse me, not the first one. This one in theaters, just because of how scheduling was. Also, I think at the time I was waiting for my brother to come back from truck driving for us to finally watch it at the house, or at least we were going to try to watch it together as a family around Christmas time. And we ended up it was just my brother and I watching it right before like we were about to have like a lunch together as a family or dinner together. And yeah, that's when I saw it. But I could tell while watching it, I'm like, yeah, I definitely would have had fun with this. What's even funny is that we'll get into our first spoiler right out of the way, which was I remember actively seeing. I remember vividly. It was something along the lines of like I think I'd seen She Said in theaters around this time, and I was like, yeah, all right, I'll sneak a peek into like the Glass Onion screening, and like they have this like I guess it's like two doors. Like when you walk in through the first set of doors, there's like another set there, but you could clearly hear the audio coming in. And as soon
Right.
as I heard Edward Norton say the word, "All right, stop," walk away, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna walk right out of here because I did not know what the hell the scene was. I was like, I have no idea what's going on. All I hear is sprinklers. I hear dramatic music, and I'm like, I'm just gonna leave. I'm getting out of here. It's like perfectly timed. So I didn't know much of the twist or anything about the twist in this film. So that was also a thing I valued most out of watching this at Netflix or on Netflix, despite people like you, Miles, had already seen it way ahead of time, and you're like, yeah, I could, if you want, I could just spoil the whole movie right now, even though we got another month left until Netflix. But I assume you didn't do that for any of your comrades. You're like, I'm not telling you jack shit.
Oh no. Well, not that anyone really asked me, but yeah, no, it's an honor thing. You if you're interested in the movie at all, you don't want anyone to tell you anything.
Yeah. So yeah. Yeah, so we already kind of laid down the groundwork in terms of like your anticipation, your curiosity for it. What are your overall thoughts on the film?
I love this film. I'm a big fan of it. I think it absolutely lives up to the potential of a franchise laid down by the first one. I like that it's its own self-contained story that each of them kind of work, and hopefully the third will continue in this tradition of sort of just being this standalone mystery where like the only thing in common is the Blanc character. I feel like as a character, he feels a little bit more fleshed out in this one. I feel like we learn a bit more about him, like what he likes, what his style is. We get to learn a lot more about his dress sense.
Oh yeah,
um,
definitely.
we'll talk about the costumes later, I'm sure, but yeah, I think it's a really strong mystery. It's a really strong ensemble cast, but it feels different than the first one. I'm sure we'll get into later sort of, weighing the pros and cons and maybe, which one we like better. But I think the fact that they're, I would say, pretty comparable in terms of quality is already a pretty strong achievement when you consider how good Knives Out is.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I'm a massive fan of this one. If memory serves, it did crack my top 10 for 2022.
Nice. Yeah, I definitely want to talk more in terms of like the awards chances for this because I feel like I need to later on in the show we'll do it, but I feel like I want to just get my little moment just to tease, obviously, just to tease you a bit, but I just want to be like get my moment of like, yeah, I called said thing, or and we'll get to that
Hmm.
down the road. But as far as my reaction to it, I definitely enjoyed it. I had a fun time watching it on my first viewing. I thought, wow, this is actually really fun. It's engaging enough. It is different like the first one is. And I like you. I agree. I do like that if this is how it's going to be franchised, then, where it's just like, Ryan Johnson's returning. He's going to write, direct, and produce this with, I think it was T Street Productions.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, T Street Productions. He's gonna get Daniel Craig back in this, and he's gonna have like a whole set of you know sort of possible suspects and such, and have like a leading with a various what do you call it? I guess like a helper of sorts to help him solve the murders of so to speak. And
Like a
I like that
sidekick type
concept.
character.
Yeah, that's a perfect term for it, and I like that a lot. Although I will say that much like the first one, I didn't fall head over heels for it like you did, and many other people did. I still like it a lot. In fact, there are some aspects about it. I'm like, wow, I actually didn't notice some of these things about it early, especially within my rewatch of this, because this is now my second time I've seen it. But there were other aspects about it that I thought, you know, if nothing else, the first one, it did have, as much as some people want to criticize of like, oh, well, I knew who the villain was of that film the whole time. I knew exactly, whatever the case may be, because it's like, there's only like many film stories. There's only so many crime mysteries you can sort of unravel and sort of create to make it entertaining. And really, the key for this kind of movie is just be entertaining and fun to watch and be plausible enough. Like if it's at least plausible enough, I can get on board with it. And I did for this. I was able to get more into it. I think for me, what kind of set this apart from Knives Out was that while I thought the Benoit Blanc character and his personality was I love that they expanded more on him, and obviously the you could tell what kind of person he is just by his sense of fashion alone. But I do think the one disadvantage this had is that I thought as much as I did care about Janelle Monae's story, I wasn't as engaged with it as much as I was with Marta Cabrera's, which was played by the Oscar-nominated Ana de Armas.
Sure.
And to be fair, Ana de Armas's character, it's more of a ticking time bomb almost, where it's like she needs to like help solve this quick and make sure she's covering her tracks. Otherwise, her sister and her mother will get deported back to where they originated from. Whereas this one, there's not really much of a ticking time bomb, and I'm totally okay with the differences that they had for this, but at the same time, I also don't think that the other thing also I had an issue with was that I thought the characters overall, like the Catherine Hahn, Kate Hudson, Dave Bautista, and Leslie Odom Jr. I thought they were all interesting characters, but as the film goes on, I thought they were. I wish they were a bit more compelling for me, but I get it. It kind of adds into the bit of like the idea of disruptors and how the true disruptor was really Helen all along. Out of all the members of the group, it was really Helen was the one who was like the disruptor, so to speak, or Cassandra, so to speak, because they were the ones actually doing something outside of the box. They were actually doing something that they weren't just following, follow these instructions and you'll earn your success or whatever. Where she was like, no, I'm gonna say fuck the instructions. And she, even that Gordian knot scenario with the box where
Yeah.
she ends up breaking it at the beginning, where everyone there's this like big elaborate montage sequence with like split screen angles of like
Love
all these
that
people trying
scene.
to
Yeah.
solve it, which is really good. And I that instantly for me was like, okay, now I'm invested in this, and I like the sort of differences between of like how this Janelle Monáe's character, you could tell instantly just by her reaction and by looking at the note of like, oh, it's from Miles Braun. It's like, oh, this piece of shit. And you can instantly tell what kind of character she is compared to the others, where they're like, "Oh, we're getting a weekend excursion! Yay! I get to get my tan on. I get to go for a swim. Do some jogging. Go fishing or whatever." And she's like, this piece of shit ruined my life, or ruined my sister's life, as we find out. And yeah, and I thought that was really the one aspect of the film where I was like, yeah, these characters are fun and all, but they're not as compelling as the family from the first one. And I get it. Again, once again, you know, it's got to be different and it's got to stand on its own. It's just something that I think, for me personally, I would have liked as much, if not more, than the first, if it had had that element of it where I cared more about this group as a whole. The other thing also that I don't know if you had this issue either, but the pacing. First off, I didn't even notice on my first time watching, and that's probably because I was pausing in the middle of it and we're like, all right, we got to go to the bathroom and such, do our bathroom breaks, and then we'll finish the rest of the film. I do like the idea of subverting your expectations. Like Ryan Johnson always does with his films. He did it with The Last Jedi. He did it somewhat with Looper and some of his other films he'd done in the past, where he subverts our expectations, where you're expecting one thing to happen, but then he's like, "Oh no, actually, I actually planted this from the beginning." And if you actually watch the movie, you're like, "Oh, like you see the seeds planted throughout the film, especially in Knives Out in this." Especially with how you can kind of piece together, through the first half of like what's going on, so to speak. And I didn't even notice this until I was watching it again. But there's a moment where all the lights turn out,
Yeah.
and Daniel Craig is looking around and he sees Cassandra, and he calls her by Helen in the
Hmm.
film, and
Yeah.
doesn't call her by Cassandra. And I'm like, that's something I never even noticed, because I'm like, Helen, like, the first time I'm like, what? Like maybe a nickname
No,
or
it's
something?
so obvious on a rewatch, but yeah, I didn't catch that the first time either. The other big moment that I know people like to bring up in terms of things that you may or may not have caught the first time is the moment where Edward Norton switches the glasses.
Yes, I was
That's a
looking at it.
big one
Yeah,
where, and
yeah,
the movie, I think very deliberately and I think very successfully sort of plays with that idea where it messes with you in the editing a little bit and it even cuts
yeah.
back to it, but it cuts back to the wrong version of it. And so you're
Hmm.
like, oh, well, did I see it that way? I thought it was this, but no, I guess it's that. And then they circle back to it and he's like, I thought I saw it that way.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really, it happens quickly enough that like you're not sure, but on a rewatch, it's blatantly obvious. And similarly with the Helen thing.
It also helps too that he didn't use Ryan Johnson, and his editor on the film didn't use. I'm looking up the editor's name. Bob Duxey. I'm glad that Bob and Ryan, when they came time to like create that edit, they didn't have like they obviously used the same setup shot that they used, with like her twirling around and the camera movement was still the same. They didn't have like an obvious like close up on the hands, because then it would have been like,
Yeah.
oh really, like that's kind of lame. But no, it's like the same shot as it was, almost like, okay, let's do another take, we'll do it all. I do wonder though if Ryan Johnson, when he's creating these movies, if he's shooting them in the way where it's like, okay, let's try to do like different takes of this, to sort of like when we go into the editing room we could play around a little bit with how we're gonna edit the scene, how we're gonna trick the audiences, because we always hear about these screenings where it's like, like here's kind of like Clue was, where it's I guess a little bit like how Clue was, except it's like, oh, we'll just switch it around with some of these shots instead of like, oh, let's create a whole new ending for this.
Well,
um
totally.
yeah, and but still, but so anyways, going back to my thought, I yeah, so I like the structure of the film. I do think it's doing something different from the first one. At the same time, though, it does make, by restarting the film, a bit, it does kind of drag a little bit in that second half up until we get to the climax of the film. Uh, for me, where I'm like, okay, I'm like on a second watch, it's not as engaging as I thought it was on the first watch, where it's like, oh, like we're now starting to see from like, it's kind of like the Back to the Future 2, where it's like, oh, now we're seeing it from Marty's, point of view of seeing all this like 1955 stuff. And same thing with Helen, where it's like now we're seeing it from Helen's point of view. And some of that was interesting. And I will say, even on my first watch, I had forgotten that when Miles shoots Helen the second time, when we see that from Helen's point of view, I was watching it and I thought to myself, oh yeah, I forgot she dies. And I'm like, wow, that's a shame. It's like all this build up, all this work that she's trying to do to find her twin sister's murder, and then it's like, oh yeah, oh yeah, you forgot she dies, by the way. And I'm like, oh man. And when she got up, I don't know how your audience reacted, but my brother and I, we were like, oh my god, she's alive.
Oh no,
And
it was a big moment. Well, because she like gets up in kind of a funny way where it's like, so yeah,
yeah,
it was kind of a laugh moment as well. That definitely worked. Again, it plays so well with an audience. It really does.
yeah, no, I even watching it, I'm like, yeah, this really does play really great with like a group or with an audience.
Yeah,
But the what was even cherry on top of that scene for me was when we got to her taking out the little book out of her her jacket sleeve, and the
yeah.
bullet caught it. And the first, I don't know about you, Miles, but the first thing I thought of, and it's only part of it is because I played this game before, was an Uncharted when Sully revealed to Drake that it was like, like the bullet caught the book, and he's like, no way, old Francis took a bullet for you. And it's like, yeah, it still hurt like a son of a bitch though. That's all I could think of while I was watching it. I could tell by your reaction you've never played the Uncharted games.
I played the games. I didn't know if you were referring to the movie or not.
No, 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 no. Not the movie. No, 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 no.
Okay,
Yeah, no,
then
yeah.
yes. No,
The
I know what
yeah,
you're
the
talking about then.
yeah, no. The less we say about the movie, the better.
Yeah.
And yeah, but
No,
no. Overall,
totally.
though, yeah. So like, long story short, I like the movie. I think it's pretty good for what it's doing, and yeah, it's just a really fun and entertaining film. While I pull up some my own notes, were there anything in specific that you wanted to talk about in regards with Glass Onion?
Yeah, totally. Well, just to circle back to a couple of the things you said, because I think you touched on some interesting points about, even if not necessarily things that I agree with, what I understand where you would get there, just in terms of the ways it is different from Knives Out. For example, with the characters, I think one thing that makes them a little tougher to engage with is that in Knives Out, even if like, you can't really relate to, oh, your own business or whatever. Oh, they're clearly hoity-toity rich people, but you can
Yeah,
still relate to the family aspects of that. When I think is like, people have a brother who's like this, or an uncle who's like this, or you know what I mean. Like, so I think in
you have an
that
instigator.
you have someone in usual you're probably going to have someone in that family unit that you can be like, oh, that reminds me of a family member I have, so you kind of have a little bit more of an in with the characters
Mhm.
in that film. And also, as you mentioned, because of the structure of that film, you're in with Marta Cabrera a lot earlier than you are with Helen in this film, in terms of like being from her perspective. Whereas with this one, the characters are defined a lot more by their professions, which are like influencers and like disruptors and like scientists and like these things that are a lot less accessible or relatable. And they
News
are these
anchor.
th- like, yeah, like politician, like, they're not doing the kind of jobs that most viewers will be doing. And so they are that much further, and they're going to this exotic, crazy island retreat in the middle of COVID, no less. Like, so they're just
Yeah.
that much more, I think, at emotional remove from the audience. I think I still like the characters. Mainly, the cast is phenomenal. They're
Oh
great in
yeah.
different ways. They have a different dynamic, which I think works. In terms of them being interesting, and specifically sort of that group of four, with Batista, Kate Hudson, Leslie Odom Jr., and Catherine Hahn. I think what happens, and a similar thing I think happens in Knives Out with a lot of the family, but it's maybe less noticeable, is that once you kind of get a sense of where the story's going and what the shape of it is, because all four of them have such a similar relationship to Miles and such a similar sort of where they fit in the story and the structure of things, they do sort of start to blend into one another a little bit. Not that they're not distinct as they're written and performed, but in terms
Mhm.
of their place in the story, there are long stretches of it where all four of them kind of just exist to stand in the room and have a line every few minutes. You know what I mean?
That's true. Yeah, I
Which
actually
I think
yeah
doesn't, it's not a negative necessarily. Again, it's just a point of difference. Whereas
yeah
I feel like with Knives Out, because it's a family dynamic and because the way that's structured is different, you feel like like each of them has their own contributions a little bit more and that it's bouncing around them. Whereas here it's kind of just like this group that's all ultimately subservient to this one guy. Perfectly played by Edward Norton, by the way. Like, if you want a real
oh
scumbag, just
yeah
like,
and yeah, no, he's really entertaining and fun to watch. Even on my first time around, I'm like, this guy is so funny. Like he can be really funny and great in ensemble. And I do wonder. I'm not spreading any rumors or anything, or at least I'm gonna try not to. But I do wonder if part of the reason why Edward Norton's doing these ensemble picks instead of doing the more main lead or like solo big films like he used to do, like American History X or The Incredible Hulk, could be because of like potential conflicts of interest with some of the films he's been a part of. Like we've also heard some stories about having this a bit of like conflict within the directors and the studios and such. I do wonder, and I think even you and Joey brought this up of like how we're starting to see him more in these ensemble picks and less of those, and it feels like that's much better for him, especially when he's going with a director that he trusts will do a really good job, like a Wes Anderson,
yeah,
Inarritu, Ryan Johnson. And I like that a lot, and I think he does work really well. And again, he's really really funny in this. Like some of the reactions he gives are funny, especially with when the Mona Lisa's burning. I thought that was
yes, that's a good
amazing.
one.
His reaction
Yeah,
to
the
that
face
was
is
great.
contorted. Ugh. Yeah, it's really
Yeah,
good. No, I
yeah,
think you're exactly right. And, you're absolutely right in that we don't know the man. Everything we say is sort of based on the hearsay that we hear, reports and so forth from, the films he's done. But yeah, I think you kind of hit it on the head earlier in his career, because he, like, he got an Oscar nomination for his first movie. He kind of, got this reputation as this wonderkind kind of right out of the gate. And so I think if you just look at the track record and you look at how he's going in, like trying to sort of take editorial and, production control in movies like American History X or The Incredible Hulk, and you kind of get this image of like somebody who like maybe got a little full of himself and maybe, got a little too in the zone of sort of the art. And then what I think happened is, he maybe got a bad reputation and had a number of people who didn't want to work with him, maybe, who knows.
yeah.
But then you do a movie like Birdman and you play a character that, for me at least, seems like it very much reflects that kind of reputation.
Oh yeah,
I can't help but wonder if that's the one, or at least that maybe represents some sort of turning point of being a little more self-aware. Because shortly after that, or right around the same time even, is when he does start working with Wes Anderson, and now he's like a regular player, and he'll show up and do like two scenes or whatever, but like he's doing some of his best work in years in like these little bit parts, and I think Glass Onion is a great extension of that. So yeah, I think there's absolutely something to the idea of he's less, it doesn't have to all be about him. He also finally directed Motherless Brooklyn, which I know he'd been wanting to do for years and years, so getting
yeah,
that out of his system probably helped.
yeah. And I do remember at the time when he made Motherless Brooklyn, he said, "If you see me do any weird, commercials or films, from like now until forever or whenever, that just know that's probably to cover the expenses for making this movie." Like
Exactly.
he did like a cameo for Alita Battle Angel at the end of that movie. And you
That's the
forgot about
big
that, didn't you?
no, that's the big twist at the end of that movie, is that the bad guy's actually Edward Norton.
Yeah. Oh, spoilers, by the way. Sorry.
Spoilers for
Sorry.
Alita Battle Angel, which will definitely get a sequel one day.
Yeah. Yeah, we could talk about that another time because I have tons of thoughts on that idea on that. Yeah, and the other actor I do want to bring up, and I just want to go back to, I think Janelle Monáe is pretty good in this. Like
Yeah,
I
so
haven't. Go ahead.
sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead. Go ahead with your thoughts.
Oh yeah, no, I would just want to jump on that because I completely agree. I think in a similar way that Ana de Armas was sort of the emotional anchor of that first film, Janelle Monáe is for this one. And I think something that goes back to what you were saying before about the structure and the way that, by design, the whole thing kind of repeats itself. For me, at least, the reason why that works is because that second half is when the Janelle Monáe performance really takes shape once you actually, because up until then you're just seeing sort of her imitation of her sister, and because it is an imitation and because she's sort of relegated to the background for most scenes, she's sort of this more enigmatic figure, but you can't really get much of a read on her. And then once you realize A, who Cassandra was, and B, who Helen is, and now these sort of various different levels of one imitating the other, I think that performance just comes alive. I think she's so good. She's very funny. She gets all the comedic beats. She has great chemistry with Daniel Craig. Um, and I think getting to see more of her and getting to see her perspective on everything, because you get kind of an abridged version of everything you've seen before, but now you get this new perspective on it. You get to see sort of what she was doing maybe in the background of some scenes where it like cut to just before or just after a certain line or things like that. And so I think getting that sort of richer experience that sort of fleshes out the first half, which was good but maybe seemed a little slight on first glance, now it's sort of, by the time you get to the end, there's been much more sort of richer detail that sort of filled in the margins.
Even that great use of cross cutting between
Very
when
much so, yeah.
uh it was a God, what's the guy's name? With Dave Bautista's character, who was, I had it right here, Duke, when he's
Duke.
dying, and it cross cuts between that and
Oh, and
all
her
the
searching the
all the
rooms.
rooms. Yeah,
Yeah, that
and
looks
I
really
thought
good.
that was really good in terms of editing, and yeah, no, and even her accent work for both, like, differentiating between Cassandra and Helen. It's like, yeah, she is playing Cassandra, but the actual Cassandra we see is very limited screen time. But it's
Yeah,
still it's still engaging enough, and it's, again, she's able to create a different persona for both of them, even though they're twins, and it works incredibly well for the performance, and it really does showcase her acting chops, at least dramatically.
yeah.
Uh, Even if some of it can be a bit soap opera-y at times, especially when we get to the end bit there. Uh, and there were other elements of the film that I want to point out in terms of like the overall broad approach. First off, the score by Nathan Johnson I like a
Oh,
lot more
it's
than the first one.
agreed. I
It
think I think the score really steps up in this one. It has this incredible, it has that sort of feeling of adventure and travel and exotic locales. It could almost be at home in a Bond film. It works so well.
Yeah, and even the theme of like dun 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 dun, dun, like
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
like really like, it was something that even after the movie I was like, I'm still humming that motif, and I like that a lot.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, and we'll talk more about this in the awards section of the podcast, but Rick Heinrichs, who is the production designer on this,
Oh
fucking incredible.
yeah.
Like
Absolutely.
this, it like easily would have been my winner in that production design category by fucking far.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not too angry. Again, we'll get more into the award section of it, but like the production design of it, they really topped themselves from the first one, and I like the production design a lot in that one. But I knew there was no way it was going to get in because of the tight competition with like 1917, Irishman, Jojo Rabbit, Parasite, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But this time around, I really feel like you could have made a strong case to get it nominated for production design more so than the first one did, just because the competition was weak. But again, we'll talk more about that in terms of the award chances for that later. But I really also just think that the design, even of the glass onion, is really
Mhm.
great. And even with the painting room, and they're all relaxing and chilling out at, I think is great. And again, like it was just so well done. with this one. And the other thing that I just really admired about it was even some of the prop work as well, with like some of the obviously the glasses that they're handed, you
Yep,
know, and
yep.
even it was even funny too to see that they brought in Jared Leto and Jeremy Renner's own like brand
They're
names in it.
special branded, yeah, like, well, kombucha for one and hot sauce for the other.
Yeah, I would I don't know if we're gonna get I don't know what character Jeremy Renner is gonna play in the third one, but if he is playing himself, I would love to see like a little gag of like, oh, by the way, Jeremy, thanks for that hot sauce you gave me. You know, it really saved my neck for one of my cases, case or two. You know, I would just love it. It'd be like, thanks.
Well, so for I'm thinking it's gonna be one of 2 things. Either he is gonna be playing a version of himself and they'll make a gag about it,
Mhm.
which if he is playing himself, maybe suggests some sort of, like, Hollywood adjacent setting, who knows?
Yeah,
And if he's not playing himself, he's just playing a character, they could still leave it open to somebody being like, "Man, you look just like the guy on the hot sauce bottle."
yeah,
So
yeah.
that
Yeah,
they can
even
have their
something like
cake
that would be
either
great.
way.
Yeah, even that would be really funny. Like, okay, that nice little touch. Okay,
That one's
and
free, Ryan Johnson.
yeah, yeah, exactly. There you go. Yeah, credit us. You know, put us in the thanks credit for this. So
Yeah,
pretty much.
yeah. You heard it here
So yeah,
first.
yeah. So um, yeah. So like I said, I have like a whole other set of notes we can go through. Actually, the well, one of the many I do want to bring up is I still find it ironically funny that for Blanc to be the greatest, you know, detective in the world according to Google, he can't solve board games.
Oh no, I like that running gag that he hates Clue and that he can't
Yeah,
stand like or like Among Us, he just doesn't get it. I think
yeah,
that's really funny. Way to how
yeah,
sort of you can be really good at like the real life application, but like it's like, you know, you can be a really I don't know, you're a really good soldier, but you're terrible at Call of Duty, something like that. You know what I mean?
yeah. Yeah, I just find that really funny. Another one I found funny was when well, it's one of the many really funny moments in the film when Kate Hudson's like, "Oh yeah, I think I'm gonna go for a swim," and then you see Whiskey, who's played by Madeline Klein in the film, you know, ends up like you know emerging out of the pool with like this slow mo shot, and she's like. You know, actually, I think I'm just gonna stay here and tan for a while, and I was like, okay, that was pretty funny.
Kate
Uh,
Hudson, low key scene stealer. She gets a lot of really great lines.
Yeah, and even one of my favorite, I don't know if you would call this like a homage or tribute to this, or I guess like a tribute to like various murder mysteries that do this. But I love the reveal where she's standing out talking with her assistant, and when there's that shot where she takes off her hat. And it's
Yeah, yeah.
revealed that Janelle Monáe is right behind her, and I thought that was a great reveal. And it's one of the many things I like Ryan Johnson doing to adapt the old tropes of murder mystery stories and novels like Agatha Christie and such, and doing it for a new generation, or at least adapting it to modern times. Like it works really, really well with what he's doing.
Absolutely. No, I loved all of that. If we're talking favorite comedy bits, I think maybe the bit that I laugh the hardest is the bit when Edward Norton tries to initiate the murder mystery that he's come up with, and
Yeah,
Benoit Blanc like is like sort of hemming and hawing and like making it awkward to start, and then it finally gets going and he solves it in like 2 seconds, and then he just
yeah,
like cuts it off and like he's solved it before it's even technically been able to start, and then the little arrow goes and the blood spurting. He's like, "Oh, that's fun. That's cute, cute little thing."
yeah.
And yeah, I thought that whole bit and just Norton's reaction to all of it was perfect.
Yeah, no, that was great. The other one I liked was when it was well, I guess like air quotes Cassandra made fun of Miles for everyone's like wanting his golden titties, and then he just
Oh
closes the
yeah, and he like
robe.
adjusts his robe. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
good.
that was great. I love that. I was like,
That's a
oh
great
wow,
little
that caught me off
subtle bit
guard.
of blocking. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, one
and
running gag I think is so funny in this is
yeah,
Noah Segan, who's in all of Ryan Johnson's films, is like this sort of burnout character who's maybe a friend of
yep,
Miles's. I'm not like it's never really established like who he is or how he knows him, but he's just hanging out on the island, like drinking and like smoking weed, but like he's not in the plot at all. But every now and then he'll just be in like the corner of a scene, being like, "Yeah." "Oh, I'm not here."
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, and then he's even smoking with Benoit Blanc at the end,
At
where
the
he's like
end, yeah,
disruption.
exactly. Exactly.
That was great. And yeah, but like there's a lot in this movie that I really admired. I'm scrolling through my notes because, like I said, I wrote a lot of notes this time around, compared to some of these other reviews that I've done recently. That I'm, but this one I was like, I gotta write down like most of these notes. In fact, there was like a good point, like maybe 10 minutes into this, I was like, oh shit, I haven't written anything down. I gotta write stuff down. Like I gotta comment on this, in case we bring it up. It was also interesting to know that the first thing that they shot for the film was the doc sequence when they were introducing
Yeah.
all these characters for the first time. And what I love about that scene in the film, and even Ryan Johnson talked about it on, it was like a director's commentary or like
Yeah,
a
it
scene
was, like,
breakdown.
behind the scene or whatever, like, Vanity Fair or someone does it where, like,
Yeah,
they have the scene and they, like, draw the little stencils on it and stuff. Yeah, I saw that.
and he brings up more about this, but I love that even though they're all wearing masks, they're or at least most of them are wearing masks. You could tell just based on what they're wearing, what their sort of like personality is like, and how they're reacting to the COVID pandemic. Like Catherine Hahn has her mask on, but her nose is over the mask. And then
Yep,
you have
yep.
Leslie Odom Jr., who's very like
Well, he's the
almost looks like a
scientist,
hippie.
so he's
Yeah,
doing it properly.
yeah.
Or the mask properly, yeah.
Yeah, and then Daniel Craig has his mask on as well, and then Kate Hudson has her mask, but it's more like a
It's like
mesh
this
type.
see-through, like, might as well not even
Yeah,
be there kind of situation, which is
yeah,
great.
yeah. And then Dave Bautista just walks in like, yeah, whatever. I got I got a gun. I'm shooting it up in the air, and I got no mask on. It's like, yeah, we know who those
Yep.
people are. But anyways, enough about that. And yeah, and it was also really funny to know that Edward Norton, not Edward Norton, Ethan Hawke did like
Oh,
one
yeah.
day's worth of a cameo, and it was like I think he did it on his day off while he was doing Moon Knight, which was nearby if I'm
Probably
not
because 'cause he's got
mistaken.
that hair.
Yeah, he's got the ponytail.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't worry, Ethan Hawke will get around to the before trilogy soon. And yeah, and one note I also want to note about the docking scene, which I thought was great, was how everyone reacts to getting the sort of like the placebo juice going into their system with the dart gun or whatever.
Yeah.
Everyone reacts like that, like they all have a gag reflex, except Daniel Craig, who is like a mild like like yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, huh, that's something I didn't even realize, and it's just something I'm like, I just never even picked up on that at all. Again, just like
You
little
can
details.
interpret that how you like.
Yeah, yeah, you know what I mean.
You
Yeah,
could
yeah,
you
yeah,
could draw some conclusions if you wanted to.
yeah. I gave you I gave you the clues. Now you
Yeah.
solve the riddle. So,
Exactly.
and I'm looking through to see if there's anything else. And obviously, I mean, we already talked about this with the first Knives Out, but Daniel Craig, as always, is wonderful. Like he's
Phenomenal.
really
Love
solid.
it. I would legitimately like, and this is always a monkey's paw when you say something like this, but legitimately if he just wants to play Benoit Blanc for the rest of his career and just do these kind of movies, I would be content if they continue to be this good because he's clearly having the time of his life and it's pretty infectious.
Well, hell, even if this, so long as if they want to do this like a Bond franchise, I don't think you should do this like 20 films plus or such, like the Bond films have been. But I feel like if you want to do more than three, so long as you have Ryan Johnson, you have the creativity involved and the imagination that you have with each of these cases. You have a great crew involved, obviously a great ensemble, and Daniel Craig to come back. I'd be down to watching more than three. Like I
Yeah.
like so
Yeah.
long as they're fun, they're entertaining, and I'm having a blast watching them. This isn't like I'm not expecting these to be like cinema verte, Oscar, like importance, important pieces of media. I'm not expecting it at all. Although I don't want it to be schlocky bullshit summer flicks we get every couple of years we get with these kind of franchises where it's like, oh, and now it's sort of teetering out. Like, okay, like you had your prime and then you're going down. It's like I don't want that. Again, if you're gonna do this kind of thing, you got to commit all the way and just have fun with it. and do what Ryan Johnson's been doing so far has been pretty good in my opinion. Um, so yeah, Daniel Craig is fantastic in this, and I don't know when his next. I think his next movie. I know he's doing Wake Up Dead Man right now, but I last time I checked, he's doing a movie called Queer with Luca
Yeah, which
Guadagnino
is
directing.
August or September. It's later this year. We should have a trailer pretty soon, I would think.
Yeah, I don't know if you and Joey had a discussion on that, but I'm gonna keep my eye on that for awards prospects.
Oh, totally. I think
Yeah,
it's definitely one to keep an eye on. Based on the William S. Burroughs novel, Luca's obviously having a moment.
yep,
Yeah, that's definitely one to keep an eye on.
yeah. Yeah. So I'm really curious, and yeah, that's a whole other tangent we can go into, but we won't regarding with this upcoming race, but. Anyways, and a couple other notes I did want to bring up was Miles likes living in the analog world as he plays his music on the record player instead of using digital, which thought was a really interesting choice, especially using the fax machine as well instead of
Yep,
using like
yep.
calls. So that was pretty cool. He also uses radio as well instead of phone calls or any sort of satellite work. I
But it
think.
also it ties into sort of the broader theme and especially sort of the main twist at the end, which is that he likes the idea at least of all these things, but as with everything else, it turns out to be a kind of terrible, shitty, ineffective system and like doesn't
Yeah,
actually work in the way that he needs it to work. And like it ends up, some of that ends up being part of his undoing. Like the fact that he doesn't have a phone makes it really notable when he takes Batista's phone after killing him. Like things like that, for me, I think, because one criticism I've heard about this one, I don't know if that it was maybe going to come up in your notes or not, was the idea that it was a little too easy to guess who it was because who else was it going to be after a certain point. And while I don't disagree with that, what I think works about the resolution of the mystery in this one is the fact that it is so obvious and it works because it all revolves around that central conceit. And Daniel Craig sells this monologue so perfectly when he's revealing it. It all comes
yeah,
back down to the idea that Miles Braun is an idiot. And
yeah.
literally everything that you think all the different moving pieces and spinning plates and all the elements of the case that you're trying to wrap your head around, it all just like a glass onion, which works so great as a metaphor throughout the film. Once you actually like look into the center, it's actually like super obvious, like, oh yeah, this happened this way because he's an idiot. He did this, even though it's stupid, because he's an idiot. And it
And he
suddenly
took
just
yeah,
cracks open the whole thing. And I
and even
love
took
that.
he literally took notes from from Craig himself when he says it's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
leaving a gun
literally
and turning off the lights.
the same
Yeah,
day, like less than an hour later, he's like, I'm gonna do that.
yeah, and I actually like that a lot. I like that he is an idiot, and Edward Norton plays him like an idiot too. It isn't just oh he's an idiot, but Norton played it like such a smart, brilliant man. It's like no, it's not at
Mhm.
all, and I like that aspect about it. It's very consistent with what Ryan Johnson is setting up in terms of the writing and structuring of these characters. But no, I actually don't have that problem at all. Sure it's obvious in terms of like yeah after a while it's like yeah it's kind of Miles who probably
It's
orchestrated this,
well, because
but
again, and it feeds into the idea that the other four sort of kind of blend into each other and sort of become this like chimera character that just yes ands everything.
yeah,
So at a certain point, it's like, well, it's probably not any one of them, and maybe it's the assistant, but probably not. Maybe it's the girlfriend, but probably not. It's probably
yeah,
Miles, isn't it? Yeah, it's Miles.
yeah. And the other thing I do find funny is that which we'll probably just transition into our award section in a moment or two. But the one thing I did think was funny was the fact that this came out the same year as two other films that are talking about rich hoity-toity people and telling it in a comedic stance, or at least making fun of hoity-toity people. And the other two films being The Menu with Ray Fiennes and Anya Taylor-Joy, and the other film being Triangle of Sadness, which got nominated for best original screenplay, director, and picture. Um, Yeah. But yeah, no, I just find that really funny. It's like in the year, like out of all the years we get, it's like we get those other two that talk about these hoity-toity films and make fun of them that are made by hoity-toity people. Well, you know what I mean. Um,
Yeah.
but
Out
but I
out of
just
the out of the 3, which one do you think handles the subject matter the best?
In terms of entertainment value, I would say probably Glass Onion the most.
Yeah.
I did admire aspects of Triangle of Sadness in terms of its directing. Like I did admittedly thought like the first 20 minutes I remembered of Triangle of Sadness be really engaging, and I thought, oh wow, this actually like yeah sure it's a very like it's not subtle and it's very on the nose, but I actually like a lot of the performances and I like how Ruben Ostlund's directing this movie, but it did lose a bit of steam with me with Triangle of Sadness. And I did enjoy the menu overall. I just didn't fall head over heels with it like a couple, like few people have. But I would say, yeah, Glass Onion probably did it the best in terms of making it an entertaining romp, but also discussing about again, making fun of the hoity-toity rich people uh, in in our world. And yeah, so
For
I
sure.
assume you would agree, Glass Onion.
Yeah, no, Glass Onion all the way. I Triangle of Sadness, I think I probably even like maybe a little more than you do, but I think it does. I think all of the ideas it's playing with are interesting. I think the third act goes in some very interesting ways, especially when Dolly De Leon's character kind of gets to take center stage. I think that's when it sort of gets interesting. But overall, I think it's kind of less than the sum of its parts. And the menu, I was definitely entertained by, but I think I wanted to like more than I did. And I also think that's one where, if we're going to talk about screenplays, the writing sort of it has that to me, and this is so hard to pin down, and it's a little subjective, but to me at least, it has that air of thinking that it's smarter than it is. Whereas I feel
Yeah.
like Glass Onion is kind of able to back up the intelligence of its claims while also not like overstretching itself. Like it's not making any grand, like sweeping statements about society or anything meaningful like that. Like it's an entertaining murder mystery first and foremost, but it does have that social commentary in there. Whereas the menu, it's all that, but it's maybe not as clever as it thinks it is.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. Yeah. So before we get into our award section of the episode, like we usually do, is there any other final thoughts? Any last notes you want to bring up on Glass Onion itself as a whole, or
No, I think we've touched on a lot of the big things. Yeah, this is just a banger for me. I rewatched it this past week, ahead of our discussion, and it was my first time since the year it came out, and
nice?
it's just so entertaining. It just really fires along. It's well paced in terms of sort of moment to moment stuff. Like there's always something happening. There's always a good gag coming up. The performances are all excellent. It just moves. It hums. It's entertaining. You end feeling satisfied, I would say.
Yeah, like you said, I enjoyed the movie. I think it's an entertaining ride for sure, and it's one that I would definitely recommend, especially if you want to watch it in a group. Hell, even if you want to do the whole like watch along or do like reaction with like first time viewer or with somebody who's never seen it before. You know how you see on those videos where
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
we're gonna react to said movie. It's really fun. I think it's a really fun time at the movies, and even though I didn't see this in theaters, I'm somewhat okay that I waited, even though I would have been like, yeah, it sucks that I didn't see it in theaters, but there's at least one Netflix film that I've already seen in theaters, and I'm glad I paid the money for, and I made the fucking trip for, and that was Maestro. And that was definitely worth seeing on the big screen for sure. And I'm like, I am never
Sure.
forgetting
Yeah.
that experience. But with this one, I'm like, you know what? I'm okay that I saw it at home. Like yes, it would have been great to have seen it in theaters, but still. And yeah, I'm really excited to know a bit more about Wake Up Dead Man. I don't want to know too much, but I would like to know a little bit about the at least get have us see like a teaser trailer of it, because
Yeah,
what we got
I
was
kind
more
of
like an
just want to
announcement
know.
trailer.
Yeah, exactly. I kind of just want the setting and like the vibe, and that's kind of all I need. Like, just like give me a quick look at what the characters look like and that kind of thing, and then like, okay, I and honestly, like if you look back at any of the marketing for Glass Onion, they really bury the lead on what any of the plot is. And it's
Mhm.
mostly just selling sort of the vibes of the film and the stars and everything, which I think for these ones is the way to go, because obviously the less you know going in, the better.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. And and even some of the twisted turns, which, like I said, over a month after it came out, I knew
Yeah,
none of these twists. I was like, I didn't even know about the twin sister. I didn't even know about the second half. So it switches gears a bit. I didn't even know half the stuff, like the Mona Lisa getting burned, which also I have to say nice setup for that whole plot device of
yeah,
the Mona, not just the Mona Lisa, but also with the lighter itself, how it's when they introduce the Mona Lisa painting, it's like, oh, by the way, watch this, and he pulls out a lighter, clicks it, and then the glass closes, and I thought that was great. Um, yeah, but yeah, no, overall, it's an entertaining film, and I mean, we've already spoiled all of it, but
yeah.
if you're still on the fence about it for some weird reason, I don't know why you haven't seen it yet, but I definitely would recommend this, even if it's not on par or as great as the first one was. But I still I still found a lot of entertainment out of it, if nothing else. So
Absolutely. Well, here's one last thing we can spoil. What
yeah,
was your favorite celebrity cameo in this film? Mine was Hugh Grant.
yeah, I could see that. Oh God, I'm trying to even
There's a bunch
think.
of them, isn't there?
Yeah, there were Ethan Hawke. I did I actually forgot that Serena Williams was in this in like
Yeah,
a quick cameo, and I also forgot that
that's a really good visual gag. The way like you think she's just stationary, and then she just turns and is like,
yeah,
"Do you guys want to do a workout?" Or
it's like whatever, it's your money.
yeah, yeah, that was good.
I also liked Joseph Gordon-Levitt being voiced as Miles. What was it? The Dong. It
The dong.
was.
Also, one of the gags that I don't think I appreciated enough the first time I saw it, but the first time the dong goes off, and then like Miles just turns and he's like, "I got Philip Glass to compose that." Catherine Hahn's just like, "What?"
who's
I
who's
just think
yeah.
there's something
Yeah,
so
who's like
funny
Phil
about the
Ass or
idea of
something.
Philip Glass composing the dong. Like,
Yeah,
what is that?
I mean, it can't be as questionable of a career decision as Van Forstic was.
Well, I mean, listen.
I
You got to
mean,
do what you
it's
got to do for money. I'm
I
sure it was an
no,
easy
I get
gig.
it, but I'm like, you know what, doing the dong for this idiot billionaire, yeah, it doesn't seem like
Oh
a
yeah.
bad idea.
Oh yeah.
You're only wasting like 10 minutes out of my life, whereas like Van Forstic, it's like, oh wow, you wasted like I don't know, more than a day working on that score. So, anyways, uh,
That sounds about right. More than a day. I'm not willing to say more than that, but definitely at least more than a day.
yeah, it's like, here's some motifs. Okay, do whatever you want. All right, give it to Marco Beltrami. He'll know what to do, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. So, anyways, yeah. So, as far as the awards talk about it, did you think that this was? I think I know your answer to this question, but did you think it was worthy of the adapted screenplay nod? And would you have nominated for anything else?
Yes, I do think it was worthy, as was the first one. I can't remember the competition offhand, but I might have given it to that. Was it original or adapted? I can't remember.
So for Glass
Because
Onion, it was adapted.
there was some controversy over where it would end up, I remember.
Yeah, for this one, it was adapted,
Right.
and I remember the Academy stipulates that regardless of what the WGA, the BAFTA, or Critics' Choice say regarding with this kind of movie, if your movie is a sequel in any way, shape, or form, or it has a recurring character, it mostly ends up in adapted. And with
Yeah.
Benoit Blanc being in the mix, I don't even know if they even mentioned the first Knives Out movie at all in this one.
No, I don't think there's a single element of the plot that comes up, which I think is good. I don't think it needs
Yeah,
to.
yeah, and they mentioned like other cases too, and I was like, okay, that's cool. But yeah, so this was up against All Quiet on the Western Front, which I'll get to that in just a minute. Living, which I haven't seen yet. Top Gun Maverick, which I knew it was going to get nominated, and the Oscar winner, which I did predict, Women Talking, and that
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
the competition. And I remember, I'm just gonna, yeah, like I said, just if you could just give me a minute to glow on this. While I understand that there were some people on here, maybe in our show or off our show, who had thought, oh well, maybe All Quiet on the Western Front's gonna win because it won the BAFTA, and I get it. A lot of people were very confused by what was going on because the BAFTA only nominated Living and All Quiet, but for some reason And there were actually a couple reasons. Well, actually, there were a couple of reasons as to why I didn't buy that for a second in terms of All Quiet getting in for adapted. One of which was the fact that a war movie like that would win adapted screenplay. And I just thought in my head, this is really strange that it's going to win all of a sudden with just the BAFTA. And granted, we have seen movies before that have won just the BAFTA and gone on to win the Oscar for adapted screenplay. We've seen The Father. We saw there was another film that won it. Black Klansman did it as well. But the difference between those and this one though was that All Quiet on the Western Front had the disadvantage of being a remake in which the first time it told that story from that novel, it was nominated for screenplay. The first one didn't even win it, and I started noticing a trend around that time of like, okay, if you're adapting a source material and the first attempt or whatever earlier attempts there were that got in for screenplay and lost, chances are your current remake or reboot or add reinterpretation of it is not going to win. We saw that with Little Women. We also saw it with The Star Is Born as well. And so that alone just like kind of like weirded me out. Like why are people buying into this so easily? But then again, we've all fallen for the trap before in various categories in various years. I've had that too. You've had that too, Miles, where you're like, oh, I guess this didn't happen. Even though I was promised by that idiot Matthew that said thing was going to happen. Um,
Nonsense. I mean,
yeah,
to that, as somebody who was predicting All Quiet, all I will say to that is you got to remember All Quiet came on real strong towards the end there. Like, I think a
it
lot
did.
more than any of us were really expecting.
Yeah,
And I think there was some, even if it didn't turn out to be true, there was definitely some wisdom to the idea of it just like being an overperformer because it kind of was. And
it
like
was.
it won the most out of anything that was nominated in that category, so like it wasn't complete, and like that was women talking's only thing, which isn't always a deal breaker for screenplays, we've seen many times, but it was just interesting. I don't know, I you were 100% right, but I think it was probably pretty close.
It was, and I will say also after the BAFTA wins, it definitely showed to me that while Everything Ever Rolled Once was still winning picture, director,
Yeah,
screenplay, and at least two acting categories, I always knew that All Quiet was probably our runner up, although you could argue that maybe, before we went into the Oscars, maybe Banshees could be a runner up for picture, or maybe Elvis was. But for me, I always saw the BAFTA wins for All Quiet as more of a sign of this has strength in at least outside of international film. I knew it was going to win cinematography. I think most of us did.
yeah,
And I definitely knew it was winning the Oscar for score the moment they nominated it for BAFTA, and then it got nominated the Oscars. I'm like, if this wins the BAFTA, it's over. Like All Quiet's gonna win this easily. And if nothing else, it showed us a sign of like, yeah, All Quiet on the Western Front won production design, and it beat out The Fablemans, Avatar 2, uh, Elvis, and Babylon was another one. And if anything, it just showed a sign of strength for All Quiet, and it I remember too at the time. I don't know if Joey got a chance to talk with any voters, but I remember Matt Naglia from Next Best Picture podcast. He had mentioned he talked with a handful of voters who said, "Yeah, I've talked with as many voters as I could. They all despise Babylon. In fact, they're going to boycott it and make sure it's not getting in for any kind of wins, even production design." And those same people he talked with went all in for All Quiet. I'm like, oh boy. Um,
interesting.
yeah, and as far as like the women talking thing as to why I predicted that was with for the record, at the time of this recording, I am now 8 years consecutive for adapted screenplay winners predictions, right? At least on the night of. I find it very funny that when I was watching women talking for the first time, I thought in my head halfway through, I'm like, if this can get into picture, I think it's winning adapted screenplay pretty easily. And I think a lot of it came down to the amount of support for Sarah Polley. Like everyone knew it wasn't going to win picture, but there was enough support for Sarah Polley, especially from the Critics' Choice and the Writers Guild giving them the award. And on top of that, too, I don't know if you would want to call this a coincidence or a weird stat, but every adapted screenplay winner since Forrest Gump got a Screen Actors Guild nomination of some type. And that was something I think I granted All Quiet on the Western Front isn't a SAG, production, so to speak. It's an international production,
Right,
but
right.
I do wonder if having the actors branch by your side really does help, one's case for adapted screenplay. And even the last couple of years alone, we've seen the screenplay awards go to screenplays that were written by their directors, or their directors
Yeah.
having a hand in writing their screenplays. Because that's how Black Klansman won. That's how The Father won. Hell, that's how Cord Jefferson won for
Yeah.
American Fiction. And again, you also had like the topping of like D.D. Gardner, Jeremy Kleiner, and Francis McDormand producing Women Talking, which allowed that to win the adapted screenplay thing, Oscar. And then Top Gun Maverick, I predicted getting nominated for sure, because and what's even funny is that I had a buddy of mine, Nick Zednick, who was on the Nightcrawler episode, and he was such a staunch believer. Like, he saw this Top Gun Maverick at long story short, he saw this at like an early screening of it, and he came out of it and he told Nico and I in the group chat, he said, Top Gun Maverick is not only going to make $1 billion. This is, by the way, days before it even came out in theaters, by the way. But he said it's going to make $1 billion, and it's going to get nominated for Best Picture. And I was like, there is no fucking way this is happening at all. And I saw the movie, and I'm like, I guess this will make money. And then when I heard it's like, oh no, it's actually going to make 100 million opening weekend. I'm like, what? Like, okay. And once it made $1 billion, and by the time I saw it a third time in theaters with my brother and my dad, because we were taking our dad to see it for the first time, in like August, I saw there was like a predominantly older crowd there and so packed. I'm like, shit, this actually might get nominated for picture. And then it just made me like, as we were like getting into like the final days, everyone was kind of rushing along. Like, is The Whale going to get nominated for adapted screenplay? Is She Said going to get in? I just thought in the back of my head, I'm like, if that USC scripter that Top Gun Maverick got, and then they got rescinded or revoked for some reason, for whatever reasons there were, I can't remember what they were. But when it got into there, and I thought, you know what? With how many films are ineligible for WGA, I do wonder if this could get into that guild and then probably get into the Oscars. But that was also in a time period where it's like the Oscars will announce their nominations first, and then the Writers Guild would announce after, like
Yeah.
a day or two after. But yeah, I predicted that, and now we have Oscar nominee Aaron Kruger, the same guy who wrote Transformers 2, Transformers 3, and Transformers 4. Um, so take that with just remember that, guys. We nominated that guy. And I mean, we could all, I think we all could agree though that it was Christopher McQuarrie who was the one that probably saved that script from whatever it was.
As has probably been the case with most Tom Cruise vehicles of the past decade.
Yeah, and again, that's good though. It just shows like how
It's
strong
not a
of a,
bad
a
thing. No,
friendship they
no, no.
have. Oh yeah, but yeah, and but yeah. So going back to what I said though, in terms of like other Oscar nominations for Glass Onion, I would have loved to have seen this win production design easily. A score
Yep.
nomination would have been pretty cool.
Yep.
Although that was like another weak lineup we had. Although I remember you really
Hold
loving
on.
Everything Ever Rolled Once.
I mean, that had a great score too, and I wouldn't have been mad at that. But think about how good the Glass Onion score is, and then think about that All Quiet score that
Yeah,
won. And does that make you
yeah.
mad just a little bit?
Oh yeah. Oh, it fucking did. Even on the night of, I was like, I know All Quiet's winning score, and even though I knew this, I'm like, I am still pissed at it. Like,
for
you
for
know,
tones, essentially.
yeah, like come on. Like even I said in my review when I first saw that in like October, November, I said to a couple buddies of mine, I'm like, the score is easily the worst thing about the movie because it's either a knockoff of what Thomas Newman did really well and was like the one score of him that I liked in 1917, or it's just being like obscenely inappropriately used in terms of how the music is done throughout the film, because the rest of it is just so yeah, it's like you
Yeah.
might as well just have like a temp composer write it.
Yeah.
But yeah, but yeah,
But no,
it's
I
yeah, go
agree
ahead.
with all those. I would have definitely liked to see get in for production design and score. I think even more so than the first one, costumes. Like the
Yeah,
costumes in this across the board are phenomenal.
yeah, yeah, because and I know that was also another surprise for me. I was like, I did not see Wakanda Forever winning on the bingo chart. In fact, it was even hilarious seeing Elvis lose costume, makeup, and production design all in a row, and I was like, oh my god, is Elvis going home empty-handed? Like, what the fuck is going on? Like, what? Like, oh my god, this is suddenly becoming like one of my favorite Oscars easily. I'm like, wow, we're actually not getting any bullshit winners.
Yep.
Uh, but yeah, that's pretty cool. And then obviously everything ever all at once. I'm not as in love with it like you are, but I did. Even I will admit there are aspects of the film that I really admire and appreciate, and I would recommend people check it out. If nothing else, just for Michelle Yeoh and Kiwi Kwan, who I think are spectacular and easily deserve their flowers that they got. And it was even funnier watching that movie with my brother because he was crying in the last half of the film, and I wasn't. I was like, yeah, like it's touching and all, but I said to myself two things. One, in a perfect world, Michelle and Kiwi Kwan would get their deserved flowers. And two, if this can keep the momentum up like it's been doing since March, all the way up until at least December, I think we found our new Best Picture winner. And sure enough, I called it.
There it was. And it's a beautiful feeling that something that strange can make it to the head of the pack.
Yeah, even lead actress winner,
Yeah.
the her winning lead actress alone was like, holy shit, this is nuts. And then the next year we saw Emma Stone winning for Poor Things, an even weirder film. I wonder if that trend is gonna continue this year with a certain film coming out. We'll see. Yeah. Anyways, I'm looking through to see what else there was.
I've heard the argument for supporting actress Janelle Monáe. I don't know if it's as strong as the Ana de Armas equivalent from the previous movie,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't have been mad about it if it happened. Certainly.
Yeah, I'm also looking at the Screen Actors Guild ensemble. So the lineup that they had nominated, which was actually a pretty strong lineup: Babylon, Banshees of Inisherin, Everything Ever Old Once, which won the category, The Fablemans, and Women Talking.
You can take Babylon out of there.
Yeah, yeah, probably. I mean, I like I do like that Damien Chazelle finally got one of his films in for an ensemble nod to begin with, but I do agree probably of those five, Babylon was probably the weakest.
Yeah.
But there's other aspects of the film that I think are a bit more weaker than the ensemble as a whole, but still. Yeah, but other than that, yeah, it was a pretty strong, at least a pretty entertaining enough year. We had Brendan Fraser, who finally won his Oscar for The Whale, which that's an even longer story about that whole Elvis and the whale thing.
We do not have time for that whole saga.
Yeah. And it was also nice seeing that they went with Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, the one good Pinocchio movie.
Yes.
Yeah, speaking of a movie that was like also like a year we were so overtly obsessed with like said topic or story. It was like Pinocchio. It's like we had the Pauly Shore one, we had the shitty Robert Zemeckis one, and then we had the Guillermo del Toro one, or at least the one that he co-directed. Yeah, so it was a pretty interesting year, and I think even RR got nominated for original song and won the category as
Hell
well.
yeah.
Which I think I remembered you being like a big fan of as well.
Oh, I fucking love that movie. I'll sing its praises all day, every day.
Nice. But yeah, other than that though, it was yeah, a pretty interesting year. If nothing else, it was one that I was actually okay with most of the winners we got.
For sure.
Except for some of the All Quiet stuff, which I was like, really, like, come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
But yeah.
honestly, I will take that sacrifice for Everything Everywhere doing as well as it did.
Oh, honestly, I'll take that sacrifice so that way we don't get Elvis an Oscar for anything.
There you go.
Like,
there you go.
Even if the way, like, I know a lot of people hated The Whale, and I understand the critiques of it, but at least for me, at least, it wasn't like an undeserved win like Butler would have been, which I do like Butler as an actor, fine enough, but that performance for me never really stood out as like, oh my god, gotta give him an Oscar. But yeah, no, overall, really good year.
I was team Colin Farrell, so I was out before we even started. Really,
yeah, that was one where I was like, oh god, it really
it was never gonna happen, but
yeah.
it was never gonna happen. But that for me was the performance that was like, this should really be the one we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, even Paul Mescal and After Sun I thought was pretty good for what he was doing in that film. But yeah, no, Colin Farrell, yeah, he probably was technically the best of the bunch, but I'm okay the Frazier one because I thought it was a pretty
Yeah.
solid performance, and probably the one performance from him I was like, I did not expect this out of you at all, and that's a good surprise. Because usually when you hear all this hype and build up for said performance and you watch, you're like, yeah, it was okay, or
No,
really,
he
like,
is
give me an
good.
Oscar.
Like it's, he's not faking it till he makes it. He's there. He's just doing the work.
Yeah, that's all the really like other stuff I have to bring up. Other than I'm curious to see what Wake Up Dead Man is going to be, or at least what the vibe is going to be. I'm also really curious too if it's going to do any kind of like festival run because I just read while we were talking on Glass Onion, Knives Out and Glass Onion both premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival, had a fall release as well, at least for theaters, and came out just in time for awards prospects. So I'm curious to see if Wake Up Dead Man is going to be doing the same thing too, where they're going to wait until TIFF and do it that way. But as I said earlier, even if it doesn't get a lone screenplay nomination, I think I might just have you back on for a third time and be like, "Fuck it, let's talk about it like a bonus episode of something," and be like, "All right, let's talk about this." And yeah, that would be cool. I think
For sure.
if you're up for it.
There's no way there won't be something interesting to talk about it.
Yeah. And another thing, and that's the other thing too I do like about his films is that even if love it or hate him, we still keep talking about him. Like
There's always
even
something to it. I mean, the fucking chokehold that The Last Jedi has on a
I was about to
certain
bring that up.
segment of the population.
Yeah, I was about to bring that
That
up.
movie lives rent free in so many brains.
Yeah, and yet when I watch some of it, I mean, again, I haven't seen it all the way through, but whenever I watch it, I'm like, guys, it's just okay. It's just doing so. It's trying to do something cool and different. Like, yeah, it's there's some lame stuff about it, but at the same time, there's actually some pretty interesting stuff in here. I would argue is something we haven't seen Star Wars be this challenging since Empire. I would argue.
Yeah.
Because Empire was really the first one that really did something new and different. It wasn't just a clear black and villains are black and white. It's so clear. And this was something that was doing something that was making an attempt to do something different.
Yeah, listen, love it or hate it, he took his shot with it. And when you compare that to The Rise of Skywalker, which maybe takes negative shots and how few shots it takes.
Yeah,
Like it retroactively takes away shots that the previous film took. Like,
yeah,
I mean,
it,
yeah,
yeah. That's one where
you
I
see
had
the
a
difference.
yeah. Oh, definitely, yeah. Even just like how it's presented and such, and
Yeah,
yeah, that's a whole other conversation. And hopefully too, again, I think that what also adds to the benefit of Glass of these Knives Out movies, they don't need to tie it into like a official trilogy. You could do,
no,
it's they don't need to have like a beginning, middle, and end to its trilogy. They could have easily if they wanted to, but they just said nope. We're gonna start with the new board, new game, and we're gonna have new players except for Benoit Blanc.
yeah,
And I like that they're taking that approach to it, and it's something that I think is a very wise decision in my opinion because I think when other mystery franchises or films trying to be a mystery franchise try to do it, it's like you just don't have the talents as a filmmaker or you don't have the right story there, like the new like Kenneth Branagh, Hercule Poirot films try to do. It's like
yeah,
it's not really there, but um, yeah, but still, yeah, we're already going off on a tangent here, anyways. But
yeah.
yeah, so I think just to wrap things up a bit, like I said, really glad to have you on the show, Miles. I'm very appreciative for you to come back on. Outside of the Knives Out movies, if there's another film that you want to have, be on the show and talk about, let me know. But yeah, like I said, just thank you so much for being on the show, and you are now knighted as my first recurring guest on the podcast.
Awesome, man. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Uh,
Thanks for
so
having me
bef-
back.
yes, yes, yeah, and hopefully we'll make sure these aren't the only two times you come back. But before we
Exactly.
go, is there anything you'd like to plug in or where our listeners could follow you along outside of your Twitter feed?
Yes, absolutely. Well, you can follow me on both Twitter and Letterboxd at Miles on Film. That's MYLES on Film. You can also follow me on Instagram at Marvelous Miles. You can check out my short films American Exorcist and Once Upon a Dracula. They are both on YouTube under Aftershock Pictures and Chase Capo, respectively. And stay tuned to all of that for more news about my first feature, which was shot at the end of last year and is currently going through a very slow but very productive post production process.
Yeah, as someone who's worked on short films, you need a lot of patience. Especially, I've never done a feature film, but I would assume we need even more patience than you would on a short film.
Just
Uh,
so many moving pieces. Even and let me tell you, once you see it, like it might be the simplest feature anyone's ever made, and there's still a lot of moving pieces to it. So
oh yeah,
yeah, it takes a while to even the movies you think are the laziest and simplest. It takes a lot to put them together.
yeah, oh yeah, definitely. I agree with that statement. As for me, you can follow me and the show through Linktree under at Matthew995, where you can follow along on all my social media accounts such as Twitter and Letterboxd. On the same site, I've also provided a link where you can listen to more episodes of the show. And if you're interested in being in the hot seat like Myles has today, let me know, and hopefully we can arrange that happening soon. I will be adding, as we progress through the year, I will be adding new guests and some recurring guests. So Mile won't be the only recurring guest on the show. I do plan on having more. In fact, I've actually started to have some conversations with some new guests and old guests coming back onto the podcast. And we'll see where that goes. I won't reveal too much other than I have a couple already in line that I'm very excited to talk with very much. And yeah. So in the meantime, we hope you enjoyed listening to the episode and we hope to see you at the movies. Take care, guys.